Toastmasters, it's the zenith of communication, especially in the communication track. You'll be able to achieve it when you're able to compete in a contest. Because that is when you rub your shoulders against the best. It could be in the club, the area, the division and the district. That's when you really challenge yourself as a speaker. I believe the contestants can really vouch for that. Having said that, we'll see how we can get contests ready. Next slide, please. Alright, our Toastmaster today made my job easy by mentioning Simon Sinek, right? And taking a leaf out of what he said, Simon Sinek said, always start with the why. So I would like to understand from all of you, why do you think evaluation is necessary in Toastmasters? Why do we evaluate speeches in Toastmasters? Any idea?
To improve the speaker.
To improve the speaker.
To allow the speaker to improve himself based on the evaluation.
Fair enough. Round of applause, please. Anybody else? Any other perspective?
To identify what is the strength and weakness.
To identify the strengths and the weakness. Perfect. Any other perspective? Yes.
I think through evaluation we are able to give a flavor to the audience. What are the different aspects of evaluation, different structures of the speech?
Okay, and serves the purpose for the audience as well. Very good. Okay. Anything else? Alright. In my opinion, I believe we evaluate from two perspectives. One is from the speaker's perspective and second is from the evaluator or the audience's perspective. Explain please. First, let's look at the speaker's perspective. Let's say I am a speaker who's coming from a club. I'm part of VR Advanced Toastmasters Club, an online advanced club. Let's say I'm coming to DTM Toastmasters Club to deliver a 5 to 7 minute speech from my pathway. I am going to deliver a speech with two main intentions, because if you look at Toastmasters, the one beautiful USP of Toastmasters is the positive environment that we built here, right? It's a kind of confidence that we get even after delivering not so good speech as well. So it is for us to motivate the speaker so that he or she comes back onto the stage and doesn't run away from the club. Motivating is one thing that we evaluators do really well. Having said that, it's not all rainbows and sunshine, isn't it? It's to ensure that the speaker, when he or she comes to the stage next time, becomes a better version of himself or herself. That's why I believe value addition as to, like we said, identifying the strengths and weakness of the speaker and giving it to the audience and to the speaker is very important. So these are the two main objectives from the speaker's perspective. The next is the evaluator's perspective. Let's say I am an evaluator coming to BTM Toastmasters Club and I have the fortune of evaluating Toastmaster Ponram's speech, right? Now I'm not going to look at Ponram as one of the most celebrated presidents of Kormanga Toastmasters Club or the district officer that he's, the area director. I'm going to purely look at him as a speaker who's going to deliver a speech with these two intentions. After Ponram delivered his 5 to 7 minute speech, how did I feel? That's the most important aspect for me as an evaluator. After I look at that, I look at the impact on the audience. Was the speaker able to create a certain kind of emotion or a change or any kind of shift in the minds of the audience through his or her speech? These are the two aspects that I always look at from an evaluator's perspective to understand how did I feel, what was the impact on the audience. This is from the evaluator's perspective. I've framed out a very simple approach. The entire presentation is called Speech Evaluation Simplified. I hope you can see that. It's called the ARTS method. How many of us have looked at the evaluation contest judges ballot? Perfect. I see this experience and the senior mentors raising their hand. Once we get introduced to that we build in some point of time to the evaluation judges ballot, there's a framework called ARTS. A stands for analytical quality, R stands for recommendation, T stands for technique, and S stands for summation. These are the 4 parameters on which I will be explaining how evaluation works in Toastmasters and how we can get contest ready. And please note, for analytical quality, it holds 40 marks, recommendation 30 marks, the rest two, technique and summation, is 15 and 15. So in totality, it's for 100 marks. Is what we get judged on by the judges who come from other clubs. So the most important is the analytical quality that we'll be speaking about. Alright, when it comes to analyzing the content, I would like to understand from all of you, what do we look at when we speak about content? Anybody? What's the first thing that we look at when we speak about content? The message that the speech is giving.
The idea of the whole speech.
The idea of the whole speech. Perfect. the message, the idea. Anybody else?
The relatability.
The relatability. Perfect. Okay, anything else? Okay, when it comes to me, whenever I am drafting a speech, the first and the foremost thing that I take care of is the basics. Because if the basics are strong, this is something I really learned from one of the members from DTM Toastmasters Club. If you take care of the basics will take care of you. So that's something I learned from the senior member known as Toastmaster Husna from DTM Toastmasters Club. And one thing that I always believe in is to have the intent right. What is the intention with which I'm giving a speech? It could be, like you said, a message. Or it could be just to make the audience laugh, whereas Sudesh did that and won the Pure Speech contest. Or it could be to inspire the audience with a nice message. Or it could be just to inform the audience or you to persuade the audience. Having a very definite speech purpose is very important. Our L1P, writing a speech with purpose, right? After we find out the intent is when we move to the structure of the speech. Was the speech well structured? Did it have a captivating opening, a solid body, and then a meaningful conclusion, right? The OPC of the speech. That's something that we look at in the structure of the speech. And finally is the transition. How was the speaker able to knit together the entire speech? Was the opening body coherent, or was there a gap, right? That's something that I always look at when it comes to analyzing the content, because as evaluators, we're always told that you evaluate the speech, not the speaker. But then the content is what drives the speech. So that's something that I always look at in terms of the content. Is next the delivery. I'm going to be very candid here. Something that I've noticed in Toastmasters, especially in contests, delivery sometimes takes the front seat. I've always believed that the content is the king or the queen of the speech and the delivery is what aids the content. But unfortunately, sometimes the delivery takes the precedence, right? Having said that, the delivery is genuinely important because it's not just what you say, it's how you say it, right? When it comes to delivery, again, I've made very simple points. It's the vocal variety. The three main pieces that I focus on vocal variety: the pacing of the speech, the pauses, and the pitch, as to how well the speaker is able to do the vocal variety. The next is the body language, right? We are an in-person club where the speakers will come and deliver the speech on a physical stage. How well is the speaker able to utilize the stage? How are the hand gestures? That's something that I always look in terms of the body language. And finally is the language. Our words are the medium through which we tell our message, right? So I always have a keen eye for the language as to how well he or she did. It could be the figures of speech, or it could be how the spoken language is. That's in terms of the language, is the delivery of the speech. Next, please. After I've told about the basics, the content and the delivery, these are the three things. Like you mentioned about some things that stand out from the rest of the evaluators, I always look at the relevance of the story to the speech. I've seen some of the best speakers come and give a nice story, but they add something else so that they reach the 7.5 minute mark. So I just look at if this bit is necessary, it makes sense. So the thought process, right? The thoughts get converted to words. That's why I look at the thought process of the speaker. The next is the expressions and the emotions. You would have seen this, the experienced Toastmasters would have seen this. In most ISC speeches, there's a lot of dramatization, a lot of expressions and emotions. Did actually sit well with the speech? Did the speaker overdo the emotions? Or did the speaker underdo the emotions? That's something I always look at as an evaluator, the examples. And finally, the speech title. I believe the speech title is something the contest master tells in the opening of the speech and somehow gets forgotten. So I believe as a speaker, how do we include the speech title and how do they make an impact in the speech? That's something I always look at in terms of these three extra analysis points. Next. Now comes the technique. Now I would like to understand from all of you, what kind of technique do you use for your evaluation? Anybody? While you are evaluating, yes?
CRC.
What is CRC?
Commendation, we start with commendation,
Right.
and then recommendation, and then
Commendation again.
oral recommendation.
Perfect. Okay. Anything else?
I use, first I do a commendation, point 1, point 2, maybe restrict to 3,
Okay.
and then do recommendation next.
Okay.
Do recommendation next,
Okay.
and then summarize.
Summarize. Perfect. Okay. So I think more on similar lines. CRC method. Yes, one.
Intent, content, delivery.
ICD. Intent, content, and delivery. Okay. That's another method. I've always believed in the simple philosophy. If you keep things simple, the better it is. You spoke about the intent, content, delivery. You spoke about the CRC. You spoke about commendation, recommendation, summarization. I've always followed a very simple technique where I believe as an evaluator, first step is to break the ice with the speaker that I'm talking to and with the audience as well. So I'll start off with the commendations, the basic sandwich method. I'll cover 2 to 3 commendations, good points that the speaker did really well, that I spoke in content and delivery. Then comes the crux, the recommendations, right? And as an evaluator, something that I've always been very cognizant is to have 3 recommendations, especially in a contest where if you look at the other contestants and you want to be placed in the top 3, you will have to stand out from the rest. So as an evaluator, I make it a point that I have 3 recommendations, and 3 recommendations which are not very common or obvious. For example, you will see some very obvious points. The vocal variety was not great. The hand gestures were not very expressive. Yes, they are meaningful, but in a contest, I would like to see as a judge, because I've been a judge as well for many contests, I'll always see out of 10 to 12 contests who was the most different. That's something I always look at in terms of recommendations. Finally is the summation, so that everything is in a capsule, everything is summarized well and is presented in a nice box to the speaker. That's something I have always done over the course of time. And time allocation is very important. How much time is given for the speech evaluation?
2 to 3 minutes.
2 to 3 minutes with a buffer of
30 seconds.
30 seconds. I always make it a point that up until 1.5 minutes, I cover the commendations. Up until the 3 minutes, until the red card is shown, I go up till the recommendations. The last 20 to 25 seconds is what I give for the summation. Might sound a little risky, but I believe that if you're being given 3.5 minutes, utilize it to the maximum. So the first 10 to 20 seconds would be to break the ice, would be to have something for the audience as well. Then I would jump to the commendations, then the recommendations, and finally the summation. So utilizing the time of 3.5 minutes is extremely important, and this is something that I've known in the judges as well. Judges are instructed not to consider the timing, but then there's a subtle difference in their mindset when they don't see the red card. They see the speaker is not prepared enough, is not going up to the red card. That's something I always recommend to utilize the entire 3.5 minutes, maximum to 3 minutes, 20 seconds or 25 seconds. That's about the method. The next is introduction. How do we start the evaluation? Would any of you like to tell me how do you start your evaluation? Anybody?
I picked a quote from what the speaker had used, which I thought adds very well. It's simple, connect to the audience. I start with that particular quote and I say how that affected me.
You pick a quote that you really resonated from the speech, and that's how you start. Perfect. That's one of the ways. Anybody else?
I will do this analogy method.
Analogy method. What is that?
Take, just like what Abhijit spoke about, taking a quote.
Right.
Use the speaker's speech
Okay.
and pick up an analogy as the introduction to set the tone for the evaluation.
Right. Perfect. So you again pick something from the speech, set an analogy, and then move it. Perfect. Yes.
So if we know the speaker, we can talk about their growth history, their journey, what was the last piece they delivered, where they are and where they are planning to go.
Okay, that's one of the things we can do. However, I would not suggest in the contest, because in a contest environment, you would not know the speaker, right? He or she would come from a different club, but I get that in a regular club meeting, so as to tell what he or she has done well. Perfect. Anybody else? This is something that I have been doing. Again, it might not be the most advisable piece of information, but this is something that I have been doing. Every single time I do an evaluation, I look at relatability, I look at how I can connect with the audience first. I say that because it's not just a speaker who's listening to me, it's an entire audience that's listening to me as an evaluator. So I make it a point to make it as relatable to everybody, and I trust my impromptu speaking skills. So I go onto the stage, I sense the energy of the room. For example, when Toastmasters today, Sudesh came on stage and he spoke about Simon Sinek, I had no idea that when I would speak about it. Because he spoke about it is when I remembered start with the why. So I see how I can relate with the previous speaker or the audience in general, and that's how I start my evaluation. So the basic thing is, again, like you said, extract from the speech some audience interaction. Basically setting the tone rather than just diving straight into the evaluation. Next slide, please. The next comes the commendations. Again, 2, maximum 3 commendations so that we don't overdo it. A speaker more often than not knows what he or she is good at, right? Because when we write the speech, we have a basic understanding about how well we did. So I think it's important that we restrict this commendations to 2, maximum 3, and while giving the commendations, also demonstrate with examples. For example, let's say I'm evaluating Shalini's speech, and Shalini gave a wonderful speech about her son and how her son made Shalini proud. I won't just say about very generically as to how well Shalini spoke. I'll go to the nitty-gritties of the content of the speech. What exactly made me feel that way that she's proud of her son? That's what I will focus on, and that's how I demonstrate using examples. And then I transition to the next slide. Is the recommendations. I think recommendations is what makes or breaks an evaluator in a contest. Because I have noticed after speaking to a lot of chief judges and judges after the contest, they all come and tell me, Nikhil, a lot of contestants spoke about the same points. But when it came to recommendations, I really like that one point that stood out that none of the other 8 or 9 contestants spoke about. You see, when you speak about something that's very unique or something that really made an impact, that's when you stand out, and that's why you're able to make a difference in the judge's point of view. So that's something that really helps you do well in contests. And again, make sure you again back it up with examples. If you all notice throughout my presentation, I've always had just 3 points, and in those 3 points I had just 3 wordings, as in 3 examples. Because I believe the power of 3 sits really well in just a 3-minute evaluation. You can't do more than 3, especially in the given time frame. Do justice to each of them using examples. And then you transition to the summation. I have seen some of the best evaluators in our district, District 121, lose out on contests because they couldn't summarize. They were going on till the recommendations till 3 minutes 20 seconds. They realize time's running up, they don't want to get disqualified, so they're like, we are done. And they forget to summarize, and they lose out on 15 points. So always make it a habit to summarize your points without explanation, just by stating the points so that you don't overdo it. That's in terms of the summation and what can the speaker take away. Alright, now coming specifically to the contest that's going to happen in the 3rd week of February is what I was told. Let us say the contest is approaching very soon. Let's say it's coming up next week. What do we do before the contest? What do we do during the contest? And what do we do after the contest? This is something that I have been doing for the last 6 years of contesting, and this is something I would like to share with you all as well. Before the contest, next slide. How many of us can see this? Is it visible in the light? Not really? Okay, can you turn off the lights here? Is it possible? Okay, is it visible now? Perfect, okay. I believe the experienced Toastmasters would have seen this, but for us, for most of us who are contesting for the first time, this is what we call as a judge's ballot. This is basically the Bible, the Bhagavad Gita, the Quran, call it whatever you want. This is what the judges will blindly score you on. It's a very objective contest where they're being given 4 parameters, like I said, A, R, T, S, 40 marks, 30 marks, 50 marks, and 50 marks. And they will score all the contestants based on these parameters. And at the end of the contest is when they'll submit only the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd place. Having been a judge myself, I want to tell you very candidly, judging might be a very objective job, but then we're all humans. There will be some tendencies or biases towards people that we like the most, isn't it? And that's how it works. So see how you can present yourself in such a way you stand out and you also make a difference in terms of the audience as well. That's something that I'll always take care of, to know what parameters am I being judged on before the contest begins. Yes?
I'm not a Toastmaster, but I've done a lot of evaluations myself.
Okay.
And specifically coming to this sheet and the fact you mentioned about audience relatability.
Okay.
So I believe that relating with the audience is very important. And somewhere down the line in Hindi, there's a saying, "Jo dikhta hai, wahi bikta hai."
Right.
So if you relate with the audience better, I feel the speech has had a much better impact.
Right.
So where does audience relatability come here in your sheet, and is that more important than technique and content?
Okay, fair enough. Thank you for the question. I've attended a few programs called as the judges training programs, the Toastmasters in the house would know, where we always be told that technique is very important, but the relatability that you spoke about, the audience relatability, that again comes upon the analytical quality about how you're able to analyze the speech, right? As an evaluator, the way I present is not really in this except the technique. But then as an evaluator, I'll at least score the evaluator or the person who's on stage based on their presentation and how they're able to put across their points. So the relatability might not be very visible on the judge's sheet, but it'll definitely be running on the judge's mind. That's something that I've always noticed. I hope that answers your question. Okay, any more questions about the judge's ballot? Okay, great. Next slide, please. Okay, this was before the contest. Can we go during the contest? Next slide, please. Oh, before, then previous slide. Previous slide. What do we all see here? A blank sheet. Again, the experienced Toastmaster would know. This is all we've been given during the contest. No mobile phones, no smartwatches, no connect with anybody else. 25 minutes up. 25 minutes up. No, nothing else except this blank sheet. And I believe this blank sheet can be a game changer based on how we utilize it. This is something I always do. In a contest, I take 2 blank sheets, whereas we've been given just 1. I take the first blank sheet to make notes, brief notes about what the speaker did, the highlights. After I've made it and the speaker finishes his or her speech, we've been given 5 minutes of silence where nobody in the room is allowed to talk. 5 minutes for ourselves to make points. That's when I pick up the second piece of paper. I divide the page into commendations and recommendations. And my first focus will be on which is the most important point for me. So I'll obviously focus more on the recommendations so that I can give more weightage to it, while simultaneously looking at the commendations. So that's how I will divide my blank sheet that's been given to me. I take 2 of them, I divide it into commendations and recommendations. And at the end of the 5 minutes, please don't forget to write your name. I've seen many cases in contests, especially at the area level a couple of years ago, where a Toastmaster forgot to write his name, and the chief judge was a very senior member who followed the rules to the T. He said, nothing doing, we are not going to give his sheet back. If he wants, let him go onto the stage without the sheet because he has not written his name. Because there's no proof that it's his sheet, right? So always make it a point that you write your name if you want the notes, you want to carry notes onto the stage. That's in terms of during the contest. Next slide, please. Needless to say, these are the 3 most basic yet important aspects for an evaluator. Listen very keenly, observe how the speaker is moving, how the speaker is speaking, observe how the audience is feeling, and also simultaneously write. It's a lot of things to do at once, but that's the thrill and beauty of an evaluation contest as to how we can do all of this in those 5 minutes. That's something that I always like to do. Next, please. And finally, what do we do after the contest? Right? Before I go to the tips and pointers, after the contest, I always make it a point that after all the contests are done, I go and speak to the target speaker. Did you feel what I said made sense to you? Did it help you grow as a speaker? Then I also go after the entire contest and I go and speak to the chief judge. Not necessarily for the points or for the marks. I just go and ask for recommendations as to how was it? How did you think? Without disclosing the marks. That's something I've always done after the contest. And because I've been contesting for the last 6 years, sometimes even the best speaker doesn't win the contest. Especially in your club. There are 12 of you contesting. On a given day, anybody can turn up in their best version, right? So please don't take contest results to your heart because sometimes it might not seem fair. And I'm speaking that from experience. So always give it your best because contest is one avenue for growth and to challenge yourself. But the results can be subjective because not everybody thinks alike. That something is after the contest. Before I end, I would like to give a quick 6 points that can summarize all of this for all of us to remember for the evaluation contest. Evaluation speech structure. The structure forms the skeleton of any speech. I know of a district champion last year who gave an amazing feedback, who was my competitor, but then he missed out on the structure. He basically started with commendations, recommendations, again went to commendations, again did recommendations. He did 1 plus 1 plus 1. Although his points were very identical to mine, I saw him getting second place because of his lack of structure. That's something I would always remind you. Let's just speak to the audience as well. Please don't put them in the blind spot where you're just speaking to the speaker and you neglect the audience. Finally, avoid using superlatives. For example, Ponram, you're the best speaker I've heard so far. Or Toastmaster Abhijit, the most beautiful presidential address I've heard so far. These kind of superlatives just add to the drama, and when you do that, you can't give recommendations because what can beat the best speech or the most beautiful speech, right? So avoid using superlatives. Next slide, please. Use your time wisely because, again, the best of the speakers can get disqualified if we exceed 3.5 minutes. And demonstrate with examples. Please don't give generic statements, always back it up with examples. And finally, practice makes perfect. I have been able to win the district championship this year in Bangalore only because of the 2.5 years of practice every day, day in and day out, fumbling, going down, not giving up. These are the attributes that really help me to win the championship. So always make sure that you practice, especially in a club like DTM, which is very supportive. Make sure you take up the evaluator's role. Next slide, please. Alright then, that brings us an end to the 30 minutes I had. I think I do. How do we think the session went? Was it useful? Insightful? Okay, thank you. This is something that I have been doing myself and something that I have done over the past 6 years, something that I have followed myself. Now I'd like to understand from all of you, do you have any questions regarding the contest or anything that you would like to ask me? Anybody?
I have one question.
Yes.
Like, usually in our club, we rely on the notes and we use that notes to do evaluation. But how about in district level? How many of the candidates actually rely on notes, or how do they probably perform?
Okay. Did you all hear the question? Toastmaster Abhijit asked, in our club meetings, we use our notes to give feedback. How does it work in the district level? Do we still use notes? In the last 4 years of district contest, all the winners, barring one, all of us have used notes. So it's been very categorically told to the judges during their briefing, please don't take into consideration if evaluator is using notes, because evaluation contest is not a test of memory, it's a test of your analytical skills.